Share. Okay, so scope. Yes, scope is the boundary of, as you mentioned, boundary. So we need to make sure what do we understand by a boundary of the project. What do we need when we are talking about a specific application and its boundaries? Okay, so let's have an imaginary situation. Okay, let's imagine we are doing a project. Okay, our project is um, our project is developing um, our project is developing an application where we uh, store all the student information. Okay, so our our system, it's just simply gonna store information about the students. Okay, so that is the scope. Okay, so is that a good scope or a bad scope? Okay, are we gonna be storing student information? Okay, so is that giving you guys enough information? Is that the information that we got from the scope definition enough to build a full-fledged system? Uh, what do you think? The scope is just store in student information. Is that helpful information or not? Yes. What are your inputs on that? The scope definition? Does it make sense, or does it too vague, or it is the perfect amount? Dilshan, Devinder, Isuru, what do you think? Defining the scope of the project. Is it enough? Yes. So from my perspective, if I were the developer who the project manager that we're going to be developing, I would say definitely yes, it is giving me an idea like 1,000 feet from up if I get about this project, but it doesn't reflect what I need to do, what sort of things that I must cover. What do you mean by students? Okay, if I'm thinking about only the students, do I need to store any other information? No. So it does not give me the scope of the project. Okay, so if I give something like this, if I convey this message to someone else within the team or within the stakeholders, they might need more information. Okay, so the scope of the project, the definition of the uh, uh, definition of the project scope should be done by a project management role. Okay, so we will be saying, okay, we will be storing student information. Along with that, we need to say, okay, within the boundary, okay, within the school or whoever attending to the school, yes, we consider them as student, and we keep their first name, last name, address, and so on and so forth. Okay, so uh, when the before the project is started, okay, when we are like starting out the project, we should have a clear definition, clear scope of, okay, these are the fields, or these are the information that we're gonna gather. these are the functional requirement. Okay, so functional requirements in the sense, if I want to send an email, if I want to send a printout, if I want to query out and view a report, so those are all the functions within the system. Okay, so we will define those things in a document. We will say, okay, we will have these information stored. These are the actions or the functions that you can perform. And there are like non-functional requirements. Non-functional requirements in the sense, these are not a user might say or might request, but there are features that we need to provide. So for example, we need to provide security for the system. Okay, we need to say, okay, when we are storing information, we store some sensitive information in a way that nobody else can see. Okay, so in such scenarios, what will happen is the um, in such scenarios, what will happen is we know for sure that okay, these information have been secured in a way, so others want access to this. Okay, but client or the person who is doing giving us the project, they might not understand these things fully. Okay, that's normally the case. They do not understand sometimes what do you understand by security, what do you understand by two-factor authentication. Okay, what do you mean by scalability? Sometimes people do not understand. People, they have a little bit of doubt on those technical terms. So what will happen is we need to give them the idea. We need to uh, tell them the exact requirement. Okay, so these are the things that will protect your system. If we since we are adding these security features, the information will be secured in this and this way. So for example, scalability, if I want to say, okay, if there are like more than 1,000 users coming to the system, it will be automatically scaling up to another instance and it will be working as expected. So our system have a very little of downtime. Okay. So those are like non-functional requirements. The functional requirements, you should also say, okay, these the printing function, uh, the printing function, email function, and everything. Those are the things. It functionally works. So those things need to be uh, write down as well. So the scope, what are the things that we're going to capture? Functional requirement, non-functional requirements. Okay. So any other reference, okay, any other reference that we're going to do, and we will need to make sure what are the things we do not going to do. Okay. So when we are talking about the scope, we need to specifically say, okay, these things we are not going to be doing. Okay, we are not going to manage the students. We are not going to manage teachers, or we are not going to manage any other resources available to a student. No, we are only focusing on students, and that is it. Okay, so when the scope is defined, everybody in this in the application, they do not have any surprises. Okay, say for instance, when you propose this to the clients, okay, they know that what we're going to be building, they know what we're going to be making. Okay, so we have a set of information that people can understand. Okay, these are the things that we're going to do, and these are the deliverables the project is going to give, and these are the things that we can't expect. Okay, so the whole scope is documented, and people know what we are dealing with, what we are getting, and when we are getting it. Okay, so the scope of the project is very important. Okay, the main reason is that scope of the project definition is important. It's gonna be the first thing um, uh, that a client would be bargaining on. Okay, so from my personal experience, if you haven't write it down, okay, if you haven't write it down, you can't take the word of you can't take what do you call a requirement by okay, I said it and that's it. Okay, do not ever do that in a project. Okay, when you are doing a project, everything is written down, the scope is written down, everything that you're going to do is written down, and you have to get the client's approval on that. Okay, you get the client approval. Once you get the client approval, then you will go proceed. Okay, if the client did not approve and if the client is not saying, okay, this is not within the system, then you can go back and say, hey, we agreed upon this, we agreed upon this scope, we agreed upon this. Okay, here are the proof, you signed it or you approved it. So if you're coming with anything else, the project might have different effects on it. So for example, if you're asking something bigger, or if you are adding something to the system, then the timeline might go up. Yes, if you're asking a new feature, the timeline might go up, the cost might go up, and the things that the estimations that we are doing, everything going to change. So if you are willing to pay the extra cost, if you are willing to bear the extra time, then we will do this change. Otherwise, we are not going to do that. Okay. So anything within the scope, when we are defining the scope, when we're defining these things in the application, make sure you write it down, get the approval, and deliver it to the team. Okay. Without a signature or approval, do not even think about reaching the development team or the project management team to work on a feature or something like that. It's going to be really hectic. Okay. So in a case, so we defined our scope and yes, we agree upon. And once we started working on these things, client might say, okay, we have missed this. Okay, that happens a lot. Sometimes the initial scope, yes, we have agreed upon, but some things we have missed. We are humans. Sometimes we can miss here and there. Okay, but in a scenario like that, okay, we can't if it is small or maybe something that is not a big issue, we can talk through and we can get it done ASAP. Okay, but if it is a feature that is going to be changed, a lot of things going to drag and it's going to change the way we look at the application, then we should ask the client about a changed request. Okay, or we call it as a CR, normal term, or we call it as a change request. So whenever we are defining something out of the scope, or when we are doing some sort of change in the middle, or when we are doing the system, so we need to make sure we request a CR, change request. Okay, so we need to have the change request with us. Once the change request is given, okay, there's the client will propose, I need this change. Then from our end, we initiate response. Okay, so these are the changes that you have requested, this and this. For these changes, we need X amount of dates, X amount of resource, X amount of money, and are you willing to agree upon that? You know the consequences, you know how it's gonna drag a little bit. Are you willing to do that? If the client agree upon the CR, then we will take upon that. Okay, so if the initial scope has changed in any other way, what we need to do is we need to make sure the CR is accepted. The CR is what we call what we need in the application. and the CR is met. If the CR is met, then we will be going forward. Okay, so do not think, do your initial scope. The scope need to be given, verified, and signed. Once it is done, if there are any changes coming, make sure to raise a CR and do that. Never ever get any of this, the scope, CRs, or anything taken out of word of mouth. Okay, never do that. That's a hectic thing to do. Okay, okay, that somebody called me and told, and somebody in the HR department or the boss called me. No, whoever it is, whatever the change is, okay, you have to take the responsibility. And once you signed off everything, once you've done everything, you have to make sure that this is executed, the process is executed, everything is done, then proceed. Okay, never take a word of mouth. That is the worst decision that you can ever take. Okay, always have proof. Okay, so another thing is evaluating the project requirements. Okay, so you need to evaluate the project. So how much, how do you evaluate a project and its requirement? What do you mean by evaluating? What do you mean by evaluating a project? Yes, anyone have an idea? What do you understand by evaluating a project? Project's requirement in this scenario? Yes, there is what we call this as a feasibility study. Anyone knows what do you understand by evaluate project requirements? Yes. Anyone? Hello? Yeah, Dinesh. What do you understand by project evaluation? Hello? They're having a different discussion. Um, Anyone else? Isuru? Devinder? Vindhya? What do you mean by evaluate the project requirement? Yes, anyone? Raise your hand if you know. Yeah, so basically when we are talking about an it's what we have a response. Let me check on the chat. Understanding what the requirement of the project. Yes. So understanding of the requirement of the project, that means sometimes clients or stakeholders, whoever proposing the idea of we need to do this, they come up with sometimes crazy ideas. Okay, I'm not literally saying those are crazy ideas, but sometimes we do not have, so they think, okay, this is feasible, right? We can do this. Why can't we do that? And so sometimes in perspective of the software and in perspective of limitations that we have, we can't do that. So one of the projects that I got pitched into, like the application, that evaluation that I need. So you guys know that in Sri Lanka, most of the time the tea 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 plucking is done by manual labor, right? People need to go and select the correct leaf, and they need to pluck it out. Okay, so they do it in an efficient way. But one of the client came along. Okay, we can't say it's a crazy idea, it's an idea. uh, the idea was, since we have drones and drone technologies right now, why can't we use a drone to do the manual labor job? Okay, so we basic idea is a drone will fly over the tea state, identify what are the areas, or what are the tea leaves that we can pluck, and rather than doing it by a human, the drone will use some blades and capture those things. Okay, so that is a project idea, right? That's, we can't say that is not a bad one. Of course, the advantage of doing such a thing is the drones will have much effective travel routines. Yes, so sometimes people need to go on different path, but a drone can easily fly over. Yes, we can do that. And identifying the leaves rather than a human error, the machine have less error rate, picking the right leaves and everything. So that's a good idea. It's an idea that could work, right? So what's the hold on this? Okay, anyone can tell me what kind of errors by normally when you look by generally when you look into this, what are the general errors that you might find in this requirement? The scope is clear. You need to plug the tea leaves using drones. But what is the challenge? What are the hurdles that we need to go through in order to get this done? Anyone have any challenges that you might see in this requirement? Yes, anyone? Anyone having any? Okay, I think there is an issue in here. Nobody. Then you guys should take this project and work. Since you guys don't have any issues, seems to be, then I think you guys can do this, right? Nobody have an error. Okay, I think there is no errors. We can do something like this. Yeah, experience drone control. Yes, that's an issue. We need to have drone control. You might hit someone else. You might land it somewhere else. Yes, that is a really good uh, evaluation that you have done. Yes, Madhushak, good. What are the other things that you guys need to do? Let's say even if you automate these things, the drone control is automated. The drone is self self-flying. What are the other issues that might come up? Yes, one of the most thing that I would think is the amount of energy. Okay, the amount of energy that we need to spend on flying a drone. Okay, so we can fly a drone and if you pick 10 grams of tea leaves, and it is costing us way more than 1,000 rupees for that. That means it is not the worth of energy, right? It's not the worth of the cost. So we might the first thing that we'll experience is the energy consumption. The cost will be high. Then the tea will be really expensive if it is picked by drones. Okay, so the energy factor comes in. Then the most of the time the climate factor comes in. Okay, most of the time it's going to be rainy. People are used to work with a hoodie on, but not the drones. They can't operate that clearly on weather, on bad weather conditions. Okay, the GPS signals might be lost, that's kind of thing. So by looking at the project itself, you guys can see a lot of issues with this. Okay, so the project manager's role is to identify these things. Okay, of course, the client have a good idea, but it is not doable, at least for the time being, with the limitations that we have. So we need to evaluate these things. Perhaps we have a prior experience on such failed experiment or such success experiment. We need to convey the idea. Okay, yes, we can do that, but if you are doing that, the cost of plucking tea leaves will be this, and that, and with the profit margin and everything, 100 grams of tea bag will cost around this. So we need to realize, we need to tell them the exact issue with this solution. Okay, so evaluation the project requirement. Okay, whether it is doable or not, whether what are the current limitations. There can be, there are like hardware limitations. There can be software limitations, and there can be ethical limitations. Okay, sometimes we have some ethical dilemmas. Okay, not only hardware and software. So if for example, a project that we're going to be building is to like uh, mm, the project requirement is for steal someone's credit card number or to steal someone's personal information. So if that kind of thing happens, if the project requirement involved in such a thing, we need to evaluate the requirement and say whether it is ethical or not. Okay, so limitations on any of these sites will affect. So make sure we do the evaluation prior to doing the initial project, or whether we have the capabilities and everything to make this happen. Okay, most of the time if most of the time people will come and expect the software. The client will be expecting this to be working. It's need to be working, right? So we need to dial it down. We need to say these are the evaluation, these are limitations. So based on this, it cannot be done within this time frame, or it cannot be done within this cost. Okay, the evaluation of the project is not feasible. Okay, we need to evaluate. So we need to consider the triple constraint always when you are evaluating the project. We need to evaluate always. We need to evaluate the constraints, whether we can done within the budget, whether we can done within the resources, whether we can done within the time frame. Okay, so the triple constraints we should not be exceeding. We should not um, expect these things to be exceeding. If we are, then we are in little bit of jeopardy. So we need to evaluate the project whether we can do it or not. Okay. And the third one is identifying and evaluate risk, prepare contingency plans. Okay, so this is one of the most important thing. Okay, as I mentioned earlier on, every project, every project, even though software or not, it's involved in certain risk. Okay, so there are There are reasons, there are things that we have control, there are risk, or there are things that we can't control. But anyhow, if we come across a risk, how we gonna prepare for the risk management, and what is our contingency plans? So identify risk is somewhat difficult and somewhat broad on some scenarios. It's obvious in a software project management. There are certain things. There are certain things could go wrong. Okay, especially with the hardware that we are using, the software that we are using, the people we are working with, and especially with the situation of the environments, maybe those kind of things will affect. Okay, anyhow, we need to evaluate the risk. If we are having risk with hardware devices, we need to have backup devices ready. And in order to work with the application, we need to make sure, okay, we have backup hardware with us and that is working. And if it is a software related, we have the legit software, and we are using the legitimate software, so we do not get hacked, or we do not get unnecessary request, or we'll be hacked or something like that. So we need to make sure we are using the correct software and we are not taking a risk on that. Okay, so most of the time, when we are developing software, we use sometimes pirated softwares, right? They are that's kind of thing. Okay, if you are like not adhering any ISO certificate or something like that, most of the time people tend to use pirated software. Okay, so one of the issues that you will see the pirated software, they are using some sort of cracking or hacking sort of tool, and they insert their own Trojan horses, malwares, or anything like that. So while we are doing the project, now all of a sudden that malware get activated, and what you will get is uh, uh, what they will do is hack the system. Uh, uh, what they will do is when they hack the system, they will lose everything that they have done. If we have developed a project, then the whole project is gone. Okay, they are asking ransomware, bitcoins, whatever, and everything is gone. So there's a risk. Okay, there's a risk if you are using a pirated software. So as a project manager, you should tell, okay, uh, uh, the engineers who are the stakeholders and everyone, okay, there's a risk. If if the stakeholder or someone comes tell you, let's use pirated software, then you have to say that you have to step up and say, no, if you're using such pirated software, what will gonna happen is somebody can hack the system. By the middle of when we are developing the software, and if somebody take over the machine and deploy a malware or something like that, what is gonna be? Who's gonna take the responsibility? Okay, that is a risk. So rather than taking that kind of risk, we will use legitimate software. We will keep our firewalls and everything up to date. And by that way, we do not jeopardize our system. We do not take that risk. Okay, so the risk is identifying the risk is like um, the uh, the risk is identifying usage of pirated software. Okay, the contingency plan or the preparation for that is going to be, no, we are not using any pirated or unknown source softwares. We do not do that. Okay, so we do not install anything on the machines that we are developing. Okay, we keep the machines safe and clean, and so that in that way, what will happen is we no longer have an issue with the systems and the software that we are designing. Okay, so that's the best case that we can do. Um, that's kind of contingency plan or preparation, how we can avoid this. Same goes to hardware. If you're using hardware, what we can do is when you're using the hardware and everything, you should always have a backup. Okay, everybody have a backup on your system. Then what will happen is the backup can be used in any occasion. Okay, if you are using the backup and while you are using the backup hardware, if something goes wrong, there is a hardware backup that we can use and continue. So everything that we need to identify should be prepared, and we should have a contingency plan as well. Okay, so for some reason, let's say we get a flood. Okay, out of nowhere, we got a flood. Okay, those things should be also there, but you might think, okay, that's very rare that a person lives in here or get a flood or something like that. But we can't predict the weather. We can't predict anything that's going on. Okay, so in case of a flood, these are the this is the preparation. These are the plans. In case of landslide, this is the thing. In case of a stolen laptop, this is the case. So any risk that can come up, we can have a contingency plan to overcome it. Okay, so sometimes these characteristics can be shared among multiple projects, so you don't have to think too much on everything. So for example, project A and project B, the risk is losing a hardware. Okay, so the solution for both of those projects is going to replace it or have a backup. Okay, so you can always use what we used in the project A to project B, sometimes if they are in similar. Okay, but if you're using special equipment on a certain project, then you need to have at least a backup on the hardware. This kind of thing you need to make sure uh, uh, you need to make sure that is there. Okay, so don't think about that you have to write everything from ground. No, that is not the case. You can reuse these things most of the time. Okay. All right. So identifying risk, evaluate, and have a contingency plan. That is one of the job. And one other thing is identify interdependencies. So when we are developing a software project, there are dependencies that's going on. Okay, so what are the dependencies that's going on is like there are certain requirement or certain features that need to be completed in order to proceed. So for example, the dependencies come in when we can actually plan these interdependencies while we prepare the timeline and everything. But let me give an example for the interdependencies. Say for instance, there are two modules. Okay, there are two things that we need to do. So one section is to capture user information and store in a database. So that is the requirement. Okay. The second requirement is to set up database and project. Okay. So that is the second requirement. And the third requirement is send emails for the customers. Okay, send emails for the customers. So you guys can see if we have clearly dependency, interdependencies within each of these features. We can't send emails directly for the users. Why? We do not have a user module. Okay, you can't send emails to emails to thin air. You need to send it for some user. You need the user's email address. But in order to take the user's email address, what you need is a user module. Okay, a place where you have set up the user information, the first name, last name, email, telephone number, whatever. Okay, the user module should be there. But in order to put data in the user module, what do you need is a database and a project setup. So if you do not have a project and a project setup where the database and everything is configured, then how you can insert information for that user module. Okay, project should be set up, database connections and everything is in place. Then we develop the user module. After that, we can send emails. So sending emails is depending on two tasks: user module setup and the project setup. So without the user module mm, user module is being set up, email cannot be sent. Without setting the database and everything, the project, the modules cannot be worked. So these interdependencies sometimes it is really hard to see. Okay, so in a scenario like that, what we should do is we should make sure to identify, okay, the task A is depending on task B depending on task C, and the interdependency should be identified. Okay, that's a feature a real project manager should need. Okay, it might be task related. Sometimes there can be hardware limitations. Okay, so we are trying to integrate some new AI features into our application. We are trying to get AI features in our application. Okay, we are already there and everything is done. Now all of a sudden the hardware is missing. The hardware I need to run the AI software is missing. Okay, so in order to achieve that functionality, there is a sorry, there's a hardware dependency that we should fulfill first. Okay, so we need to identify these things. Okay, rather than being surprised at the time of when you're implementing, we should be prepared. We should know, okay, if you're building an AI feature, probably we need a GPU or we need some hardware in order to do that. So we make sure the hardware is there, then we start on that. Okay, so make sure as a project manager, you guys know about these things in advance to work with. Okay, so interdependencies should be identified. Uh, Identify and track critical milestone. So what do you understand by milestone? Anyone have an idea? What do you understand by milestone? We know tombstone, yes. What do you understand by milestone? Anyone? Yes, anyone have an idea what is a milestone? It's not related to software even. Milestone is a common word, but in a software, what do you understand by milestone? Yes, yes. Just like a tool, no. Marking project timeline. Significant progress marker. Yes. Yes. So a milestone, what we can think is just what we have mentioned in here, a, a significant a place that we can showcase to someone else. Okay, we have reached this, we have accomplished this. Okay, so it is like what we can call a milestone is some state that we have reached by doing some changes. Okay, yeah, milestone is like a milestone we can consider as it's not related to a date per se, but milestone is something that we have achieved. So, for example, uh, we are doing a software project that is currently being used in version 1.0. Okay, the current version is 1.0. And we have a milestone. We can add new features for the version 1.0. We will add new features. We add feature X, we add feature Y, and we have fixed bug X, bug Y. We have fixed few things. And what we're going to do is we will say, okay, including all these features, we will be releasing 1.1. Earlier it was 1.0. Now we will have 1.1, which include these fixes, these bug fixes, and these new features. Okay, so by introducing a milestone, okay, by introducing some in a milestone, what we do is we uh, we have introduced an improved version. Okay, we have um, added new features, we have fixed some bugs, and we come to a place where it is more stable. Okay, new features have been added, new bugs have been fixed, and we come to a state where we can work for a while with this milestone version. Okay, so it's going to be really easy when we are working in the application that okay, right now the 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 application has reached some sort of state which is stable and it is working. So the milestone, we need to make sure that these are met. So we give names for some of the releases. Okay, so you guys might have heard about alpha release, there is beta release, then there is uh, so then there is GA release or general access release. Then we have the final release. Okay, so we put uh, some features together. Okay, we give an alpha release, that is like anything there can be broken. It is not considered even testable. I mean, you can test it manually, but you don't write automation test or anything like that. The alpha version is like what we called a barely working prototype. Okay, then we need to set a milestone. Okay, we will be giving you guys the beta release. It's normally when we are giving such a thing based on the company and the software and its people, we give a date. Okay, we will be reaching the beta version on next month. Okay, next month 15th or something like that. It's always better to give what we call a milestone release date, so we know when and where it will be um, when and where it will be like released. Okay, so we'll be releasing the beta version in a month. Okay, so you anyone who is working with that project and they know, okay,
So within 1 week or 2 week, what is the given week, we have to finalize all the requirements. We have to finalize the changes that we have promised for that milestone, and we need to start working and get these things done. Okay, so identify and track critical milestone is one of the project manager's roles. So he or she knows, okay, whether we have completed the milestone, and the next thing is whether we are in while we're doing the project management. Um, while we are doing the project management, we can get an idea. Okay, are we on the right track? Okay, are we on the right track? Are we going to make it or not? So there are like quite indications that we will see how we can track the the project purpose is met, or the particular application is um, particular version is working as expected. Okay. All right. So we need to identify and track. The tracking part is really important. Participate in project praise review. So what do you understand by project praises? So most of the time when we are developing softwares, the software that we're going to be developing, you can't expect the whole solution to be delivered as one go. Okay, so we have a software, and we'll say, okay, this and this date, we will give you the software. Most of the time, it's is gonna be break down to phrases. Okay, so phrases in the sense, okay, within the first phrase, we will give you guys these things, these functionalities will be there. But on the next phrase, we will be giving, or we will be adding these and these information. These things will be added on the later on. Okay, so phasing out will give us smaller tasks to be completed. Okay, rather than focusing on huge tasks that we have on hand, we will be focusing on smaller tasks. Okay, or smaller sections of the project. So by utilizing those things, it's easy to manage as well. So you don't have to worry about the whole system. You need to step by step, you need to progress. So in a software like that, when you're tracking, when you're tracking these phrases, it's always good to review. Okay, within the first phase, within the first iteration of the software development, what are the things that we're gonna develop? Okay, and for the next iteration, we are taking these things. We are making sure that we are doing these things and these things. So the project manager knows what's going on and what need to be done in the future. Okay, so the phasing happens initially, then the second phases or anything else will continue and follow up on. So make sure we do these things as early as possible. Okay, we do these things, the phasing out. Okay, then we can also do like when you're planning the software. Sometimes if the task is too huge, if the task is too complicated, we might say, okay, yeah, we can't achieve these tasks within this phrase. Okay, shall we move it to the next phrase? Okay, by that, then the people have developed, there are so many features coming in, people have a good idea on what's going on. So we can have a better development time, or we can have good user interaction, or the developers will be way more happier if we incorporate these things in a later version. So that's kind of thing is normal to happen. So we call these things as phasing out into the next version. So that is also so in order to get that knowledge, in order to know what's in this phase and what is not, the meetings, all those things should be attended by the project managers. Okay, so the project managers knows, okay, these things are in the project, and these things will be later add on. So they have a what we call good knowledge on the project itself, rather than get surprised. Okay, there will be a huge feature coming on. Rather than that, the people or the project manager have a good idea on what's going on, and uh, by uh, by having a good knowledge on what need to be done, it's clear and it's easy to manage the task. Okay, so for example, when we are one thing in my practical uh, in practical time, it came like um, there was let's say a huge user request coming on. Okay, we need this in our system as much as soon as possible. Okay, then we evaluate this change. We look at everything that we have right now, the current structure that we are having, the current structure that we are maintaining. It does not have the capability to cater the things the client wanted. Okay, the client needed something else. We had something else, so we could not get it done. So what we said was, hey, uh, we can't get this done. Okay, this is way more complicated. The current structure is no the current structure of the application could not take this in now. But when we are developing these things, our structure will change, and we will keep in mind the structure should change in here to adhere the changes that we are in that we need in the future. So we will keep developing, but we will do not take this requirement into this phase. Okay, so if we did not phase out, what will happen is we are spending so much time, so much energy on something that we could not achieve, and we will be fail in our software. Okay, we can't achieve that within the same phase. Okay, so phase, when you are doing a phase and phase review, the project manager should know what have we done, what we'll be doing, and what sort of changes that we need to expect. Okay, so the phase reviews is a much more important thing that PM should be doing. And the um, seventh point in here, secure the needed resources. Funny thing is, like, when we are when you're developing softwares, most of the time, sometimes you need to share some resources. Okay, share resources. Those are can be human resources as well as hardware or software resources that we need to work with. Okay, sometimes there are like other resources, like a meeting place, like a location. We need to physically attend. Sometimes we need some transportation. Depends on the project, but most of the time, the common things are like hardware and software resources, human resources. Okay, so these things is like what we call we need these things. We need these resources in order to continue the project. Okay, so securing the project, say for example, if I want to book a meeting room, then I should be doing that in advance before anyone else get in and take that from us. Okay, so it's better, it's always good that we secure our resources Okay, say if I have a meeting at 10 o'clock, what I'm gonna do is I'll book the meeting room at uh, I don't need to book that if I have a meeting at 10 o'clock, I can't be expecting okay at 9 o'clock I'll book and everything will be fine. No. So if you need the resources, as soon as you get the information, you need to secure the resource. Okay. So if I have a meeting tomorrow morning, I got the message now, and I first thing I need to do is get the allocated meeting room or whatever, do the allocation. Okay. So securing resources is much more important because it's not like the others responsible for securing these things. It's the project manager's resource. It's his domain. So uh, it's better we get those things straightened up before someone else snap it. Okay. And especially software resources as well. This goes without us saying. Sometimes we need a certain software that we need to buy. Okay. Some companies, like big companies, they have what we call annual budget. Okay. So if you are doing software development, we can't go randomly buy softwares. Uh, we can't go randomly buy hardware. Okay. Sometimes we get annual budget. Within this year, we will be allocating this and this amount of hardware, this amount of software. Okay. So if you are planning to get a resource allocated, better do it as the budget allocations happen. Then we will have the resources we need as soon as possible. Otherwise, what will happen is at the end of the project or at the middle of the project, think a situation you lost your um, lost your budget and you could not proceed, then you will be in big trouble. So in order to avoid that, what we need to do is make sure as soon as we get the allocation project and everything, what we need to do is make sure these resources have been captured. Okay, we need this resource and we need this thing to be um, allocated within this and this amount of time. Okay, so resource allocation is one of the most important things. Sometimes there is like human resource problems as well. There is always in a project there will be a certain person, okay, who is having much more experience than others. So that person will be the hot commodity or the person of interest for most of the time. Like, okay, if I need this to be get done, okay, this is the person that we are going to be looking into. So that kind of situation, a person of interest should be one that we need to secure first. Okay. So if we know a certain person is gonna be working on two different projects, if the allocation is separated, always it's ideal to come up with a strategy. Okay, sometimes we need to come up with a good strategy to secure that person. Okay, securing people is little bit tricky, but you can always accomplish if you have the good focus on that. Okay, so resources allocation is pretty much important in a solution or when you're developing software. So remember, resources are sometimes scared on some projects, so we need to make sure those things are not going to waste. And secure resource, manage change and control process. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, changes are inevitable. Okay, so those things will happen. It's very rarely a user come and say, okay, I have finalized my requirement and this is the only thing that I need to develop, nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. Okay, I within my experience time, I have only met one person, okay, who had that requirement, but comparatively, it is really small project. Okay, the project is really small. So the change was like, yes, there was like not certainly a lot of changes. Okay, even if you have asked for change, but since the requirement is too small, there were no changes at all. Okay, so it's like kind of what we call a lucky situation, but not most of the time. Always, all the time that we see a application development, the requirement always changes. Okay, so requirement change management and process control, we need to make sure. So we need to make sure uh, we need to check whether the change the client is requiring, the stakeholders are requiring, affecting our timeline. Okay, is a big change, whether it is affecting our cost, our time, or anything within the resources. There are a lot of things that can affect. So we need to make sure none of those things are affected. Okay. So any change coming, we need to like re-evaluate our system, if that is the correct word. We need to re-evaluate our system and see whether this change is affecting somewhere else and so on and so forth. So we need to make sure that our project is at the same time it should run, right? I mean, by doing a CR or change request, we can't expect the project to stop and work directly on that. So what we'll need to do is we need to make sure the change client is requiring is nothing impossible, nothing breaking, and we need to continue with our project without an issue. Okay, so the change process is, as I mentioned earlier, always come up with evaluation first. Then we need to propose, if it is doable, we need to propose a CR, a change request from our side, and we'll say we will do this and this and this. It will cost this amount of money. It will drag this amount of time. Are you agreeing? If the client agreed, we will proceed. Okay, the procedure is pretty much simple, but you have to follow upon something. There might be extra steps involved in the way, but most of the time this is like the um, highlight step that we need to take on. And reporting project status, this is really important. Okay, uh, so there are like, as we mentioned earlier, there are people who are keenly interested in our project, stakeholders, boss, um, maybe direct developers, or maybe QAs, whatever the person who are involved in the project. What we need is give them a status update. Okay, so we need to make sure, okay, we are having a milestone, we are giving a milestone on next Monday. What is the status of it? Okay, we need to come, we need to, sometimes we need to send an email for the stakeholders on everyone and saying, hey, we have a milestone coming up next Monday. All the test cases have been passed, all the requirement has been gathered, this and that. Whatever the things that we have accomplished, we should put in there. And whatever we have missed, okay, whatever we have missed, we need to also mention those things as well. So you do not hide anything, okay? So you can say, we did not meet that requirement, so we'll just skip it in the email. We don't need to tell others. No, that is not how a good project manager should work. You should not hide. You should say, hey, we had this on our roadmap, but we could not get it done because there were like certain this and this amount of reasons, so we could not get it done. That's okay, as long as you do not hide these information, hide the things that we are doing. That is okay. Okay, so make sure So make sure the status is reported for every stakeholder that we have. Then identify required resources and budgets, of course. If you have a budget, the monetary constraint, we need to identify that and we need to allocate resources based on that. So we can't have like two people who is taking 50,000 rupees and the budget of the project is like 75,000. Okay, so we are over budgeting ourselves, so we can't have that. So we need to get the resources in, we need to keep the budget within the budget, and of course we need to make some money out of it. That means we need to have some what do you call the um, we need to make some money out of it. So we need to make sure that is going in that direction as well. Okay, so uh, make sure that everything in the resource and budget is in the same place. Okay, if not, then we are in trouble. Yes, the next thing is develop initial project management flowchart. So uh, in this scenario, what we will do is we'll have a roadmap of what we're going to be doing. Okay, so the project manager should say, okay, we will meet the client on this date. After that, we will prepare the document on this date. We will send the document back to the customer, get the customer approval on this date, and on this date we will start the project, and we'll be doing the initial development for 6 months. After 6 months, while we are developing, we will be also doing testing. So we will be having a uh, testing lane as well. So it's going to be parallel. So we will have a parallel flow. While we are testing, we're going to do some what we'll do some changes as well. So these kind of things we need to map it out. So the everyone knows where we are. Okay, within the flow chart, we know, okay, we are at this stage and we are doing this and we are on the right track or not. Okay, so that is something the um, project management should do. Okay, so the time estimation, estimate the time requirements. So this is one of the most important thing. When you are giving a client a budget, we should say, okay, we expect to complete this software project. We are expect to complete this software project in 6 months. This is the budget, and this is what we have allocated so far, and these are the expenses and everything. So we need to give an estimate on how much man hours, how much resources that we're going to be using, everything that we need in order to work should be in this time estimation. Okay, so the project manager should know how much time a certain module, a certain section that it would take to develop, and how much time it would make testing, how much time it would go for production, and so on and so forth. So it's mandatory to know the real numbers behind these things. So so we know for sure we are not overestimating or underestimating or over budgeting or under budgeting our projects. So this is initial estimate time requirement that we need to do. And develop detailed task list. So this is one of the tasks that you need to do. So uh, uh, these are like the stories that I talked earlier. So we have huge epics sometimes. That means the overall project scope. So this is the project scope, and within this project scope, within this time, we will be working on the user module. Okay, it's another breakdown. So within the user module, within the user module, we will have user creation part. Okay, so we use creation part, we'll have two things like front-end development, back-end development, this kind of thing. So we will break it down as small as possible. Then it will be really easy for the developers and who is responsible for making things happen to, okay, I'll take this task, complete it, and move on. Okay, as we should not take huge um, task in software projects, because it's the problem is the larger the task is, the higher the failure is going to be. Okay, so if you take a huge if you take a huge component that you want to develop, and you are taking a 1 month, and for the 1 month you might be in silent, but at the end you would say, okay, after 1 month this is not done, we could not achieve. So that is not how it should work. Normally what we need to do is we need to break down these things into smaller part. So normally what we do is we take a task that can be completed within 1 or 2 days. Okay, so within 1 or 2 days I will complete this and move on. As much as the task is breakdown, it's easy to control the project and reduce the cost. Okay, so if develop the detailed task down list, we will develop something like using project management tools like Jira or something like that, and we will break it down as much as possible to understand it. Okay, so these are like the project management functions. So make sure that you guys follow up on those. Okay, any questions for you guys? From you guys at least? No? Okay. Let me stop recording.